So many ways to win, so many ways to lose. We often talk about this. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest. Happy to have you guys with us for the Friday session as we head into the weekend, the college conference championship games on the gridiron, and of course, lots of college basketball and another slate of NFL games as well. But last night's game, absolutely bizarre. We talk about it all the time. The hook is like a sword of Damocles. Last night, Detroit Lions laying 3.5 against the Green Bay Packers at home. Lions decimated by injuries, continue to lose key personnel week after week while they continue to roll at 11-1, looking very, very sharp, and of course in a position to clinch a playoff spot. Green Bay Packers playing well and a chance to seek some revenge. And yet this game, I mean, you had to be going out of your mind at the end of this one. I don't know how many times my emotions shifted as I was taking the 3.5 points with the Green Bay Packers, as we recommended on the program yesterday. And Dan Campbell, I mean, we talk about the insanity of this man all the time. It's working. That's the good thing. Although you can go back, should haunt him to his grave, those decisions that he made, the fourth down decisions that he made in the game against in the postseason last year, as he had a chance to go to the Super Bowl and managed to screw that up royally. Now, it's great to play with guts. We always love coaches that have courage, but when does it get to the point where it's really a self-sabotaging move? And we saw a couple of examples of it last night. Actually, we saw 5 of them. As Campbell goes for fourth down situations 5 times in a game, hits on 4, and the one that he missed could have been catastrophic. And as it turned out, he managed to overcome it, but still left you sitting there thinking, my God, this hook is going to decide it. He goes for that fourth down at the end of the game to eat up the rest of the clock before he kicks the game-winning field goal, gets the victory, doesn't cover the point spread, and on that play, tell me you weren't living and dying with the notion that maybe this guy runs one up the middle, breaks through, and somehow scores the touchdown. And if you're backing the Green Bay Packers, you're completely fucked. It was just wild. Great way to start the week. And another thing, too, that we talked about, I was looking at the odds to score the first touchdown in the game, which I think is an extremely difficult bet. People like to do it in the Super Bowl. We were discussing it with Mike Jones yesterday. And I'm looking over the odds, and you had Josh Jacobs at plus 575. So I'm thinking, well, yeah, this guy's hot. He probably score in the ball game, and anytime touchdown would have been a good bet as he scored 3 times. But if you took him at 575 to score the first touchdown, guess what? You lost your money. You were separated from your capital because Detroit ends up scoring first. Very difficult prop bet to hit that first touchdown. So if you're scoring on that and cashing on that, all of the respect in the world to you. But very, very crazy prop bet. If you are betting, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be diving into it, BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen while you're laying your cash out there. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, the NHL, UFC, a lot of big boxing matches coming up. Head to the BetOnline site today, and don't forget to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Our game, when it comes to college football and basketball, starts with the Professor. This year, with some unfortunate circumstances, on many weeks it's ended with the Professor, but he looks good, ready to go, ready to attack everything. And Professor, how are you? Are you set for the conference championship games this weekend?
I am, after surviving last night. I wasn't. I don't know how anybody gets involved where Ricky Ricciardo is coaching there.
It's amazing.
That call at the end of the game. That was the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my head. And he almost paid for it as golf falls to a knee and managed to get the hand off it. Oh my God! Like, do you never learn? Like, you go for it on your own 30, you miss, you give up the tying field goal, and then you go for it again to save 30 seconds at the end. Like, what is wrong with you? Like, they are so clearly going to lose in the playoffs based on one of these batshit insane, let's go for it on fourth down calls. It's going to happen again. And I feel like he's going to get a pass on it again. I feel like Detroit fans have been so insane by 50 years of losing that they actually like this.
Oh, the fans in general love it when a coach is always going for it. But on that last one, you would have thought when they cut back to the sidelines, especially after Goff went to his knee, that they would have been putting a net over Dan Campbell and taking him away in a jacket to Tyson.
Right, and if you're on it didn't matter. He was still going to kick the field goal.
Yes,
this was just to cut 30 seconds off the game. The man is insane. I mean, really, I don't know what it is. He needs medication. I mean,
a dilaudid drip wouldn't be strong enough. I don't think
there's something there that needs to be diagnosed and medicated. Like,
yes.
There's something wrong with it.
It's a death wish. It's like he's Charles Bronson, a death wish too. Like you said, I mean, he had just given up the game-tying field goal because he left the Green Bay Packers on his own 30-yard line, which was insane enough.
On 4th and 1, he brings the scat back in and runs a sweep on 4th and 1. It's not just the going for it. It's some of the play calls. Like, again, 4th and goal from the 2, you go for it. You have the running back run a fucking Texas route. Like, it's all just insane.
The final one too, and the announcers, oh yeah, what guts this guy has, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, this move could get you suspended.
Now, I don't think it's guts. I think it's a medical condition. Like,
and Goff goes to his knee, and of course, as a bettor, if you're getting the 3.5 at Green Bay, you're hoping that they actually get the first down and don't somehow end up in the end zone. Because the last thing that you wanted to see was overtime, based on the blunders of Dan Campbell and the possibility then that you might lose by 6 if the Lions were able to take it in for a touchdown. So it worked out well if you're a Green Bay Packer backer, and I guess you feel pretty good about yourself if you're a Detroit Lion fan.
You got the hook too. I saw it at 3, which is actually, particularly a game like that with so many up and downs to end up with a push. It's just like, I think it's a bigger kick in the balls than losing, honestly. You took that game at 3 on either side. The way the game went, to end up with a push is to me like the worst possible result.
What's your feeling? I was looking at Josh Jacobs last night, plus 575 or something like that to score the first touchdown. Do you ever dabble in that? Who's going to get the first touchdown? That
like everybody else, I do it in the Super Bowl. Yeah, it's a terrible bet. Like everybody else, I goof around with a bunch of the props, very small amounts in the Super Bowl. But generally, no. I understand on an intellectual level that the blending between fantasy sports and gambling has fully integrated, particularly with the younger generation. I actually saw a bunch of interesting industry numbers this week, and it's just not me. I have all sorts of people who are engaged in it and ask me about it. Like, using last night, for example, I mean, yeah, I agree. Jacobs at 575 is a good number, but the bad news is, Detroit, the way they score on first drives, if you lost a coin flip there's a decent chance you lost a bet before your guy ever even, got to see a hit on the field. So.
Should have been taken into consideration. Yeah, I had a feeling Jacobs was going to have a good ball game against the Lions for some reason. He scores 3 touchdowns, and if you take
he had a hell of a game.
You ended up losing that bet, which that's always ugly. You were right about virtually everything except for the fact that you ended up losing your money, which is what makes gambling particularly treacherous sometimes. But I don't know how people get so heavily involved. Like you said, in the Super Bowl, it's kind of fun. Especially if you're taking it in with a big crowd, you're in some race book or sports book somewhere, and everybody's yelling and screaming, and guy scores, and you've got a guy at like 10-1. But to do it on a regular basis, I think would be particularly devastating to your bankroll. So a real tough go. All right,
so I got a story on that. I watched the Sunday night game last week with a crowd, and one of the guys has Christian McCaffrey. And I think it was pretty decent sized bet. I don't think it was, action. He's got Christian McCaffrey at over 83 yards or whatever the over under was. And, McCaffrey comes out that first drive and rips off like 53 yards. And then the third drive, he comes out and blows out his Achilles And it's like, oh, I can't believe it. Huh? Well, he's had an Achilles injury for the whole season. And
yes.
like, isn't that part of what you have to factor into all of this nonsense? I don't know.
Tough one. It's like playing roulette, because there probably are 38 combinations that could possibly happen or
Right?
close to it. But in this case, it would have been Russian roulette, because it would have put a quick end to your evening if that was your only play.
Right?
All right, we have the college football championship. The field is shaping up, and much will take place this weekend, although it's only going to alter a couple of spots. We had talked about
very little at stake for the playoffs here. I mean, in theory, maybe one at-large spot if Clemson manages to win the ACC title game. Then I guess there's a question about Alabama versus LSU. SMU. My personal instinct would be, don't get your hopes up, ACC fans. You're getting one team. Alabama's getting the last spot.
Is that going to be a constant? I mean, without Nick Saban, we used to consider it Saban metrics, where no matter what was going on, no matter what your record was, we saw it last year with what we deemed to be the fucking, which was Florida State being left out in favor of a one-loss Alabama team. And it's weird, too, because you have all the criteria that you usually considered for college football playoff consideration. And then you have style points that they somehow slip in there when they want to justify screwing somebody. I don't know that anybody got completely hosed. I guess you and I are both University of Miami fans, or at least follow the program closely.
A lot of crybabying down here.
Yeah, well, was that justified, or
No.
should the Hurricanes just take their case and give it to Rudy Giuliani?
I mean, honestly, the Hurricanes don't have a real case. And look, I'm a lifelong Hurricane fan. The Hurricanes don't have a case. I mean, if you've watched them over the course of the season, they haven't looked like a playoff team since September. The defense, one of the most disappointing units in the country, particularly the defensive line, which has just been bad pretty much since the South Florida game. I don't really see the case for Miami. There's not a lot on the schedule. Yes, I know the ACC fans are like, well, Duke is 9-3 and Syracuse is 9-3. Those are just as good as 9-3 SEC teams. No, they're not. And again, anybody in the gambling community will tell you, like, if Ole Miss and Syracuse play on a neutral field in a situation where the starters are going to play, almost is like a 10, 11 point favorite. Like, they're not equal teams. There's really not a lot of case here for Miami, unfortunately.
All right, let's take a look at the weekend and the things that are coming up. We have games tonight, of course, and Saturday as well. And you're taking a shot here with Tulane over Army as your first pick today, Professor.
I have Tulane pretty good on both sides of the ball. Your defense, top 35 units, both against run and pass. We know Army, they're a little bit more variable. They like to throw the ball a little bit more than they have in the past, but they're still basically a one-trick pony. We saw it against Notre Dame. If you can stymie the rush, particularly in the early downs, if you can put them behind the chains, it is drive killers for Army. They're good in the pass in surprise situations, in play action situations. They're not good converting 3rd and 5s, 3rd and 6s, situations like that. Tulane's, like I said, they're good against both the pass and the run defensively, and they throw the ball really well. Excuse me. Excuse me. They throw the ball really well offensively, as we've seen all year long. And we saw for Army against Notre Dame, that's a problem for the Army defense. They're still not good against the pass. Relatively light line, only 5 here. It is a home field game for Army, which does present a little bit of an interesting angle here, but I think Tulane, too much going to New York and getting a win.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and play Tulane over Army, and you're also looking at the Boise State UNLV game.
Hold on one second. I want to check the weather on that game to make sure we're not betting into a blizzard there or something. Last time I looked, it was not particularly – I mean, it's cold, but there's no snow and very little wind. So, yeah, I don't see a big advantage for Army in that spot.
All right, very good. Army was the darling of spread beaters throughout most of the season, and the odds makers finally caught up with them, or maybe the competition level did. But the last couple of weeks, they were negative against the point spread of the regular season. Boise State and UNLV, I've talked to a few handicappers, and on this show, that they kind of like UNLV. You're going the other way on this one, Professor. Professor?
I am, and I guess I'm siding with the books because I've read in a couple places that out in Vegas, the books need UNLV in this spot very badly. Played earlier in the year in UNLV. Boise State walked out with a 5-point win, despite playing pretty sloppy, honestly, offensively in that game. This time they get them on the home field. Very cold environment. Now, it does not look to snow, but bitterly cold, looking at like 22 degrees at kickoff for this game. Look, if I were a UNLV guy, I don't want to tackle Ashton Jeanty in perfect weather. Trying to deal with that guy with his power back game and his breakaway speed in 22-degree weather seems like, particularly if you're from Las Vegas, seems like, and you're used to playing your home games under a dome. This seems like about the worst possible case scenario for the UNLV defense for me. And I think Jeanty's going to try to make his case here for the Heisman. And my guess is Boise will probably try to make his case for the Heisman here. Yeah, like Boise at home, -4 in Boise, a place where almost nobody has had any success through the years as a road team. I don't think this UNLV team will manage to crack it. They did give Boise a game at home earlier in the year, but I think Boise and that offensive line is just too much in the weather conditions.
I was talking about Belmont Park being the graveyard of favorites. Boise State, that home field, could be a graveyard for no matter what caliber team is in there.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, real rough place to go in there and try and carve out a victory. All right, you're looking at the big one here, the SEC championship, Georgia and Texas. Georgia has not had the kind of season that maybe you thought. There have been some ups and downs, but they always seem to rise to the occasion in big spots. And so, what's your thought about the championship matchup in the SEC?
The head scratcher of a number, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
Georgia went 6 weeks ago to Texas, beat the hell out of the Longhorns with a healthy Longhorns team, and dominated the game. Here, de facto home game in the Georgia Dome, a place where they've played 5 or 6 times over the last few years. Always seem to dominate. Always seem to have better the crowd. I mean, obviously Texas is a huge fan base, so I'm sure the home field will be a little less pronounced than a normal spot there. But I think it'll be a decidedly Georgia crowd, and Georgia just looks like they match up very well with this Texas team. If you watch the first game, they beat the hell out of Quinn Ewers, and that was when he was 100%. He hasn't been 100% in weeks, so he could take another beating in this one. And I don't really see anything that really favors Texas in this spot, particularly with an offense that kind of struggled last week in Texas A&M. Couldn't convert opportunities. Only scored 17. Again, rivalry games, you never know what happens. But I don't see any reason to reverse. Take the Bulldogs here again. With both teams, unlike the Big Ten game, both teams having a lot to play for. Like Georgia, if they lose this game, they could wind up one of the last 2 at-large seeds and end up, at an Ohio State. They're going to wind up with a distinct game they don't want to take as opposed to a bye. So I think, high motivation here for Georgia. I like the Bulldogs plus 2.5 to repeat the performance they did in Austin. Excuse me, cough.
Yeah. Oregon's been the number 1 team all season long, pretty much, or for the latter part of the season, the majority of it, undefeated. As the national championship picture shakes out, is it wide open? It would seem that any number of teams could prevail and ultimately win the championship. Are we overlooking Oregon in this position?
No, I think Oregon's distinctly one of the 2 or 3 teams with the most realistic shot to win it. I think they've been the clear class of the Big Ten all year long with that that home victory over Ohio State, who there's a lot of questions about now after their loss to Michigan. Penn State hasn't managed to beat a top quality opponent in James Franklin's tenure. I mean, the last time Penn State got like a top 5 win, we know what was going in the locker room after the game, and it wasn't good. So it's been a while. You look at the SEC, Georgia and Texas, both have a lot of holes, but both seem to be pretty strong contenders. I think it's actually a pretty short list about who can actually, win 3 games and win the playoffs. I think Oregon, Dan Lanning has transformed the program, made them much tougher along both lines of scrimmage. They're a serious contender, and I think that's a good spot this week. Again, only laying 3.5. Now, some people saying this is a low motivation game, that both teams actually want the number 5 seed because it's an easier path through the semifinals. I don't agree with that. You have a chance in college sports to go get that number 1 seed. You're going to want to play for it. And Lanning seems like that kind of guy who's intense in every matchup anyway. I don't look for him to pull any punches. Oregon only laying 3.5 to a Penn State team, which we just said. Every time they play a featured opponent, the offense vanishes. I don't like Drew Aller at the quarterback position at all. Their tight end is a star, but if the tight end's the best player on your offense, that's kind of a limited offense in my opinion. So we will take Oregon minus 3.5 here. I just think they're a better football team and they have a much better history against top 5 opponents than Franklin does.
And we know the Franklin factor, very much like the Cristobal factor. Somewhere along the way, well, it's a little bit of a different interpretation because he just has a penchant for choking in big games. And that's a horrible record.
I don't know if it's choking or I don't know if they just have not had an elite.
Aren't they good? Yeah.
I mean, they're very good on defense, but offensively, over and over again, every time they see a tough opponent, they get real conservative and they don't seem to manufacture anything out of it.
All right, Notre Dame is a team I haven't heard many people embrace. Now, you and I are both on the same page here. I think, like me, well, when you originally saw Rudy, you were screaming that he was offsides in the movie theater.
He was offsides.
I had to be escorted out of there because I was disturbing some of the other people that were trying to enjoy the movie, and we're all teared up as he made that play. And I'm just yelling and screaming, "Throw the flag! Where the fuck is the flag?" But I believe they're 9-1 to win the national championship. Is that a fair price? Do you give them any consideration? Their lone loss to one of your favorite teams all time, Northern Illinois. But
I love the Huskies.
From that point on, they crushed everybody that they faced like a grape, averaging 30 points plus in terms of victory margin. So are we bypassing Notre Dame just because we despise them and would like to see touchdown Jesus floating in a canal somewhere face down, or do they have any kind of a shot to claim the national championship? Doesn't sound like you're going to be warmly embracing this.
Here's the thing: if they get the number 5 seed, which is possible, then you'd probably be looking at them hosting an Alabama, who I think they can beat, but I'm not going to guarantee it, and then going to Boise for their quarterfinal, which should be a win, or not going to Boise, but playing Boise in it could be the Fiesta Bowl for their quarterfinal, which would be a very winnable game for them. So all of a sudden they'd be in the semis. I don't think Riley Leonard's a championship quarterback. I don't think they necessarily have enough offense when they get into some of the bigger matchups. But if they end up with the 5 seed, it's not that difficult to pass. So I don't personally know that I think 9-1 is a fair price. I'd be looking for something more in line like 15-1.
That's what I was thinking.
Definitely not getting a bye. But I wouldn't say it's totally impossible either. In my opinion, it's not fair odds. It's not fair value, but it particularly could creep up a little bit. It could be closer to decent value there. But right off the top of my head, I'd say at 9, no. You're not getting enough of a price.
All of the kvetching, the bitching, the moaning on behalf of the University of Miami backers that thought they should have been ahead of Alabama, will that somehow find the committee vindicated? Does Alabama, with their 3 losses, do they have any chance to go all the way? And this was one of your preseason predictions. I think Bama was like 14-1. Now they didn't, with those losses, especially to Oklahoma, which was a startling defeat at the end of the regular season, especially in the fashion that it happened. But do they have any chance to bounce back and somehow be a factor in this championship chase?
Yes. I mean, look, we've seen it. On their best days, they can compete with anybody, but they are, the thing that Nick Saban never did was lose to mediocre teams. And this team has lost 3 games, and a couple of them are unquestionably mediocre losses to Vanderbilt in particular, where they got kind of clubbed. But they've beaten South Carolina, who is another team people want to argue in the playoff. They went nose to nose with Tennessee, only lost by one score in Tennessee. They beat Georgia and hung a bunch of points on them. On their good days, Alabama can compete with anybody, but they do not have that kind of consistency. So you would certainly have to question, can they bring it three weeks in a row? My answer would be probably not, but we're going to see.
All right, and one last thing on the basketball front. We discussed this on our License to Steal show yesterday, which airs Thursdays on the Bleacher Brothers Network and features our handicappers here from Bury Your Bookie. This ACC SEC challenge. Was that an aberration that it went 14-2 in favor of the SEC, or is that an indicator that there's been a serious shift in terms of superiority from one league to the other?
It's both. Look,
okay.
the SEC is very strong as a league, but you look at the SEC and they got a lot of programs right now, or in basketball on the upswing. But is that going to be a long lasting or much less permanent thing? Probably not. I mean, the SEC has definitely had upswings in basketball in the past. It doesn't tend to last. Both Mississippi schools are unusually good for them right at the moment. Obviously, you look at the top, Tennessee and Kentucky and Auburn. Again, Auburn looked like it had some serious power player momentum a few years ago with Bruce Pearl, and then it fell off. Now they're back again. Tennessee's been consistent, but can't crack through at like the 16 and 8 level in the tournament. I would need to see some sustained, consistent tournament success from these squads to declare that this is now a permanent situation. That said, anytime you go 14-2 in any scenario, that's an aberration. Like, that there's a little bit of fluke involved there. Is the ACC a little down? It is, particularly through the middle. The ACC is not nearly as strong from say, excuse me, 3 to 8 or 9 as they usually are, and the SEC is unusually strong. So it's a little bit of both. Is there an upswing for the ACC and a downswing for the an upswing for the SEC and a downswing for the ACC? 100% yes. But is it a permanent situation? Probably not. I mean, look, basketball, just like football, we are still figuring out this portal and NIL situation. And particularly in the early season, it's going to show up as teams adjust to each other and, new players. And, we're not dealing with, the freshmen like, 4 or 5 years ago where there was an expected learning curve. When you bring in a kid who's a junior or a senior, in the case of, like Omir, who went from Miami to Baylor, a super duper senior, you don't know how he's going to adjust to the new teammates and the new situation.
I think Norshad Omir, who used to play for the University of Miami, has been in school longer than John Plutarski, this guy.
I'm pretty sure he was the starting power forward next to Tito Horford.
All right, Professor, good luck. The Professor with Tulane, laying 5 against Army. Boise State at home against UNLV, laying 4 points, and taking Georgia over Texas in a repeat performance of the beating that they administered on the Texas Longhorns earlier in the season. Good luck with all of the plays. Professor, have a great weekend, and always a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks so much for sharing your insight with us.
You have a great one, Defo.
All right, the Professor, ladies and gentlemen. All right, good luck, everybody, over the weekend. Should be a lot of fun. We'll be back with you again on Monday. I did want to throw in one note. I'm a huge boxing fan. You guys may or may not know that. I've been involved in the sport for years and years, and always loved it. Had the privilege of calling a lot of matches on TV, doing blow-by-blow. And I was particularly fond of this California matchup. I think the series included 4 fights, I believe, between Rafael Marquez and Israel Vasquez. Was right up there with what we got from Gotti Ward. People always look at that trilogy and say that was the greatest of a 3-fight series. Like I said, I think these guys went to war 4 times, and war was the key word there. Tremendous action. But Israel Vasquez passed away, so we wanted to respect and go ahead and express our condolences to the people that knew him and knew of him for giving us just sensational efforts every time that he stepped into the ring. May he rest in peace. Very, very young. Israel Vasquez passing away earlier this week. All right, and that's kind of a sad note. Last night I had the pleasure of having dinner with Johnny Chan at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He's in town for a big poker tournament that he was in as a celebrity entrant. Could not be any nicer of a guy, and just terrific hanging out with this guy. Looks great, by the way. And it was a fantastic time. The Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, a major destination here for degenerate gamblers, and just about everybody else, packed to the gills each and every night. They have the sports book going there, although it's not as expansive, although it may be as expensive, but not as expansive as some other sports books that you'll see in casinos, surprisingly, since the Hard Rock, in what seemed to be a very clandestine meeting with the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, whose name has been bannered about in the news as a possibility to be the Secretary of Defense, which I don't know. I mean, we don't want to dive too deeply into the politics and the political aspects of this, but DeSantis made some arrangement somehow with the Seminole tribe of Florida where they have exclusivity on sports betting. But that being said, they really haven't expanded the parameters and the space of their sports book yet. But it was a rocking good time there. I really enjoyed it. And if you get a chance and you ever come across Johnny Chan, could not be any more of a gentleman. So I had a good time with Johnny Chan, the legendary poker player last night. Thought he was brilliant. I mean, that whole thing in Rounders was sort of based on his win over Eric Seidel in the World Series of Poker. I think that was 1985. All right, you guys have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you again on Monday and take a look at everything that transpired and see where it leads us for the upcoming week. Thanks so much for being with us. For the people at NoFilter.net, Greenlight Ventures, and also No Filter, and as I said, No Filter and Bet Online. We will see you next time on Bury Your Bookie.